Hello there, Middle-earth fans, Tolkien scholars, and everybody who loves Middle-earth strategy battle game. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Tactics and Talk. So today we're going to be talking about some dwarfs, their high defense, their high hitting power, and some of their badass heroes. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Iron Hills and Erebor Reclaimed. Now, I'm talking about both of them because I have two special guests with me today, both of who play Iron Hills / Erebor Reclaimed. Since they use similar troops, the biggest difference, though, is the heroes. So first up, he needs no review or no intro because he's been on this channel several times in battle reports and other videos. We have Mr. Josh Parrish.
Hello.
And then next up, we have the old head who we like, but we also love to make fun of because he's cool with it, Joseph Keller.
What's going on?
So, I just lost my train of thought. So both armies use similar tactics when it comes to their troops. The biggest difference is, of course, as I said, the heroes and the fact that the Erebor Reclaimed does not have the siege weapons that the Iron Hills does. So we're going to go ahead and just dive straight into looking at the similarities, that being the troops. So, Josh, Joe, Iron Hills troops, what you guys think about them?
Love them to death.
Arguably some of the best warriors in the game.
I would have to agree. So, if you have to say give one of their biggest strengths, what would it be, Josh?
Defense 8. The shield wall defense 8 is just it has held back so many advances. I can't even count them.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. You know, even just this defense 7 without the shield wall makes it so that your standard strength 2 bow is having a very hard time wounding them. And then when you get to defense 8, your strength 3 armies, I mean, they're not doing anything to you. Even strength 4 armies, which against our regular like defense 6, horde that you see a lot of in like Minas Tirith, defense 7, defense 8, they're not getting close to breaking that. Joe, what do you think?
Well, I'll go with one of their strengths, and that's their strength value 4, unmatched.
This is true. The only way to really get above that is usually a monster.
Yeah, so like, we were talking about their defense. They got a really high defense, so when you pair that with their strength 4, you're probably gonna break more shield walls than you're gonna be able to kill their shield wall faster than they'll kill yours, unless they're just rolling substantially well, like a Morannon Orc shield wall. Isengard, just the defense 6 that a lot of people tend to kind of sit comfortable at. They're just going to be, needing 5s instead of just 6s to wound them. It's a big deal. That's
true. I will say this, this kind of a side point going from there is you and I are prepping for an 800-point list event. And, I've been practicing in Minas Tirith, and Minas Tirith having shield wall similar puts them at defense 7. Well, my current list that I'm building is just, Osculian veterans at defense 6. You lose that shield wall, but the only reason I'm really looking at it that way is the fact that the event we're going to isn't going to allow Hobbit armies. So I don't have to worry about a strength 4, defense 8 Iron Hills army. And that's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, now my defense 6 shield wall can probably stand up a little better. Unless I see something like Isengard, which is still, Isengard's still out there, but it's not as popular as it used to be. So, I mean, there you go, talking about tactics right there is... that's something that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about other armies I have to fight against.
And, kind of, I don't know, like, if you had any points, Jason, but kind of a side point, too, is the upgrades you can give to the Iron Hills warriors. They're like your only warrior troop, well, one of 2, but they are super versatile in the upgrades you can give them, too. Like, crossbows, so you got your bowman covered, and then you got the Maddox for some two-handed ability.
Yeah.
Talk about another highlight is the crossbows. Those things are so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, strength 4 again is just like perfect.
Yeah, I agree. They really are probably one of the most versatile troops. They kind of cover all of their weaknesses with their upgrades outside of one, which I'm sure one of us will mention here in a minute. But they're not like going with another army I've been looking at, Corsairs. A Corsair warrior is... They have the upgrades for shields and spears and bows, but to really get the hitting power at range that like you would compare it to for an Iron Hills dwarf, you have to go with an arbalester, which is your crossbow. But if you give them an arbalester is only defense 6 against shooting. In combat, they drop down to defense 3, and an Iron Hills warrior is defense 6 in shooting and in combat. So they are taking one of those weaknesses, and they are pricey. They're an elite troop. It's an army of elite troops, but I feel like they're one of the most diverse elite troops for an army that only has 2 infantry or 2 troop profiles. They do really kind of cover all the bases.
Yeah, I agree. I think the movement is probably what you were going to talk about. Their movement being 5
Yep.
is probably like their only weakness. And that's kind of just par for the course for dwarves in general.
Yeah, that was
it's really only a weakness if you're not used to it. Like most of the 3 of us have played dwarves for years, and as soon as you get used to that movement 5, especially with those crossbows being able to counteract that lack of movement, if you can get that combo going, it becomes a very negligible disadvantage.
So
yes.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was gonna say, especially because the way Iron Hills, and I'm assuming Airborne Reclaimed also play, you tend to want to be in combat. You want to be in your opponent's face. So when it comes to that deployment, you're probably going to deploy right on that line or very close to it. So where most armies want that mobility to try and close the gap or maneuver around the board, you're not going to have to worry about that as much as like maybe in other dwarf factions. Or well, not even just dwarf factions.
Looking at
faction.
Comparing them to the Khazad Doom dwarves, you can have rangers which have strength 2 24-inch range bows, or you can have dwarf warriors that have 18-inch strength 3 bows. So you kind of have to pick and choose there what's your poison. If you're starting 24 inches apart, you've got to make a full move and pray your opponent moves too if you have the 18-inch range bows to potentially be in range for 1 turn of shooting. Or if they just sit fast and make you move your 5 inches, they're going to get the ability to shoot you, and you're not going to get to shoot at all.
Yes, I feel like you're talking about the whole army being an elite. I think that might be kind of the movement 5, is a weakness, but I feel like the true weakness for the Iron Hills Warriors is their points cost, because you're gonna be bringing less of them to a game than a warrior, a Ministerieth, or a Moran and Uruk, or even an Urukai warrior, the Isengard Urukai warriors.
I'd say they're my definitive idea of what the biggest detriment to Iron Hills is the lack of heroes and the fact that your captain costs 80 points. It is very expensive for a captain.
Yeah, for the Iron Hills army, just Dane being your big hero, definitely. That's actually one thing we were talking about last night.
I think if you look at it from go.
Yeah, so Dane being the major, really the only big hero. Your other option being Mern and Drar, which they're decent minor heroes, but the fact you have to take them together, and that Drar takes up one of your 12 spots, can bring 11 guys. And the fact that they're 140 points together, you don't get many hero options.
Right, I do agree. That's something I actually did my army review recently on Iron Hills, and I think if you kind of have to make that decision. Are you going to play Iron Hills from the point where you're just going to have Dane as your one named hero, try and take a couple captains and use Master of Battle to see if you can't steal a couple points of might, because then with their army bonus playing them pure, even if you ally, but playing them pure, you get that 4-up Master of Battle with Dane, and then 5-up Master of Battle with captains. So you can choose to go that route, but you have fewer points of might in your pool, or you can go the route where you take Dane and then take 2 heroes in Murin and Drar who are slightly cheaper, but like you said, they're not going to be leading a lot of troops since they can only lead 11.
Yeah, so that's kind of when I've played Iron Hills in the past. I actually tend to kind of mitigate that in general. I actually ally them in with other factions, so they are green allies with Thranduil's Halls and Lake Town,
Yes,
or
true.
Survivors of Lake Town,
Yep.
and which are two really good options for them because you could then have access to heroes like Gandalf the Grey, Bilbo, Bard,
Thranduil,
Thranduil,
Legolas,
Legolas.
Tariel.
So that's when I've played them in the past. That's how I've played them. I've actually never played a pure Iron Hills army, but I basically have a glorified warband with Dane, warriors, and occasionally Ballista.
Well,
More
and
often than not.
then you can go the way that Josh plays. So Josh, I know we've been talking mostly from the Iron Hills perspective, but the Iron Hills warrior is the core to an Erebor reclaimed army. Since you have you have the access to the new heroes, which gives you more hero diversity, but you are just mitigated to only using the Iron Hills Goat Riders and Iron Hills Warriors.
Yeah. Real quick on the Iron Hills. I haven't played Iron Hills pure in probably 2 years. When I did do it, I would try and I love Mern and Drar Mern and Drar as just models. It took me forever to find
Yes,
them
I
because
agree.
they're out of print, and I always tried to make it work because even though they are 140 points, you're only getting 11 guys with them. They do have 3 might each, so it's a 9 might army.
Which is a lot better than taking 2 captains for 6.
Yeah, and that's the way I always tried to hoard them out. It never really worked for me. I did try at one of your events. I tried at 1,000 points to get Army of Thror with Iron Hills. I had terrible matchups, so I never really got to play or figure out how they synergize together. But I did find I loved the old Durin's folk with Dane being old Dane being in there. And when the new models came out, I just had to have them.
Yeah, I can
So
understand that. The old Dane, there's like no way to get that model anymore unless you find a scalper or somebody who does recasts, and that probably was one of the coolest models. And he was a pretty good profile too. And
yeah.
yeah, I can respect that because in the new current old Dane is no slouch either.
Now, the from what I remember, the profile carried over relatively
It was really close.
parallel
Yeah.
to what it used
Pretty
to be.
much, but he was fight value 5 in the last edition.
Yeah, so he's actually a little better in this
He's
one.
6 now, isn't he?
Yeah. The I got him, and I wasn't a huge fan of his son Thorin the Third Stonehelm when he first came out. Now that his point drop has happened,
Oh, he
he
had a
is a lot
point
more
drop.
competitive. Yeah, when they first came out, they hadn't released the book yet, so it was 120 points to take them.
Right, when they just had the PDF
And
releases. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and when he's in the same list as Dwalin, which my favorite dwarf hero.
Yes.
Oh, I love him so much.
Yes. I completely agree.
For 5 points less, there was no point to take Thorin the Third when you had such a great model. But now that he's 5 points under Dwalin, he is a lot better to take.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I will say Dwalin to go on your Dwalin point, he is definitely my favorite dwarf. I did a game with Joe where I played Defenders of Dale, and Dwalin was my dwarf hero. I took the 2 new Dale heroes. What is it, Bard the Third or something, or Bard the Second, or Bane the Second, whatever it is. I took those guys, and Dwalin, and I put Dwalin on a goat, and I will say Dwalin on a goat with 4 attacks, strength 5. Holy cow, he can do some work. I always knew he could, but it was nice to actually see it in practice. Theory is one thing, practice is another.
The downside for taking him with Old Dane is he can no longer take the goat because he is in his old age alongside of Old Dane. But the way I find it works is you get that 6-inch banner bonus with Old Dane. So Dane sits behind the line, given that big banner bonus, and you have Dwalin just holding your line in the front and just slicing right through your opponent. pushing right through their line.
Is Dane 3 attack? King under the
Dane-
Mountain? Because that's his official name.
Yes.
Dane King. He's 3 attack, right?
Dane Ironfoot, King Under the Mountain. He has 3 attacks, 3
And
wounds.
3 wounds. Yep. So yeah,
One
not bad.
one fate, but he is still defense 8, so he still holds
Yeah,
his
he's
own
still
with +1
beefy,
to
yeah.
wound.
I mean, the only dwarf at that point who has a better defense than him is Thror from Army of Thror and Durin from Khazad-dûm. So
Yeah.
and like
Which
we talked
essentially-
earlier, defense 8 is nothing to scoff at.
Oh no. And essentially, the new Erebor Reclaimed with Old Dane is Army of Thror, but just with upgraded troops and crossbows. Like that 6-inch banner bonus just pretty much makes it a very parallel army.
Yeah, I would agree. And so Joe talked about the allies. That's actually another ally, and we've said it several times. But Army of Thror is also a green ally, I believe, with Iron Hills.
They are.
Yep. So, because I remember we had a guy who used to play a while ago, and he did Iron Hills with Army of Thror, and he would have Thror and Dane, and with them both being legends, Dane would be his leader because Dane has 3 fate as Lord of the Iron Hills. So he would throw Thror into the mix and kind of use Dane as that kind of hitter on the edge, which was nice because normally an army.
That's interesting.
Yeah, well, normally Army of Thror, if you play him, Thror has to be your leader since he's a legend, but he's only got the 1 fate. Yeah, he's got the Arkenstone, which means if you roll, you get the
A 4-up.
Yeah, the 4-up, you keep your fate, and it also makes it so a 3 is successful. But with my luck, I'd roll the 3 on the first fate, which is how it went for several of my games with him. And then it's like, okay, well, this is my leader. Now I'm out of fate. Now I got to try and find a way to protect him. So if you have Dane,
You can might it to a 4.
Yeah, that's true. But then you're losing multiple resources.
Yeah.
You're using a resource to save a resource. So I guess that would be more of a wash.
I've seen it up here a few times where the Army of Thror, Iron Hills Alliance, but it's actually been the opposite where they keep Thror as the leader because he is so, he's so hard to kill with that never-ending fate. The person usually saves the might to make sure that the fate goes through. And then they have Dane on a boar just wreaking havoc. The Iron Hills allows you to bring a range option since Army of Thror doesn't really have one.
Right.
And Thror can bring Thror brings the Guardians of the King, so you get throwing axes that you can then have Iron Hills spear support from behind. It has a very good synergy element to it.
Yeah, I agree. And that was kind of one of the things is he would bring the ballista with.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I wanted to kind of bounce back on with the Iron Hills is the fact that they can take the war machines that Erebor Reclaimed couldn't take or can't take.
Right.
Because that's like one of the big things. Because I know like their heroes aren't as like the Erebor Reclaimed heroes. Like all the named characters they can take are awesome. I think.
Oh, they're so good.
Yeah, but then
True.
so in an Iron Hills list you would just have Dane, but then you'd have specifically the Iron Hills Ballista. I don't know, like I know the Chariot's pretty good, but the Iron Hills Ballista kind of acts as that X factor we call it, something that okay, so I got Dane, he's my big hero. I got captains or Mirandrar or whatever, and then I have my big X factor, which is the Ballista, and that thing can shoot heroes. It can it can do so many things with it that it can hit targets that you would maybe want to use for Dane, which I think is one of the big things for that. If the Ballista was in Erebor Reclaimed, it would be a pretty scary army. I mean,
it would be broken at that point.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe that's why they didn't do it. Is to get access to it, you have to go from the Iron Hills perspective, which makes sense since they do come from the Iron Hills. And once Dane becomes king under the mountain, he's no longer, ruling directly from the Iron Hills.
Which, segueing into, if you take Erebor Reclaimed as Thorin Oakenshield, as king under the mountain, even though Dane is in the army list, you can yellow ally Iron Hills with Erebor Reclaimed and still get Dane as a hero of legend and then get a ballista.
Correct. You don't have to take Dane from the Arrowwar Reclaim. You can take him from Iron Hill still. Yeah, and that's the
What's
only,
the-
and that's actually the only way you can get access to that because you need a Hero of Valor, and the only Hero of Valor or higher is Dane himself.
Yeah.
What's the army bonus for Erebor Reclaimed? Isn't it Sworn Protector or Dubakar?
It is it's Dubakar, which makes Thorin Oakenshield a 6-inch banner for all Erebor dwarves. And the problem with Erebor Reclaimed with Thorin as king is that Iron Hills keep their Iron Hills keyword.
Yeah.
So they don't get the 6-inch banner. So when Thorin's king, it's okay to lose the army bonus because it really isn't helping you unless you take a whole bunch of Erebor heroes.
Right.
Yeah.
But with Dane as king, they changed the wording to where all Iron Hills changed to Erebor, so that's why
Yeah.
keeping it pure when Old Dane is king is a lot better than keeping it pure when Thorin is king.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you prefer to go with Old Dane, King of the Mountain, and Thorin, Stonehelm, then that is you take them pure, exactly like you said. And then if you're looking at allying it, and honestly, at that point, once you ally those two together, you kind of mitigate one of the weaknesses with Thorin as king. The weakness of Iron Hills, which is a lack of hero diversity, because now you're going to have the opportunity to take any of the 13 named dwarves. So
Yeah.
Pretty much all of them are just absolute beasts, like Glowin, and Glowin's
Yeah.
actually one of my favorite profiles for the Erebor Reclaimed.
He
know-
is
I know
a
Josh
low
loves
budget Dwalin.
yeah, I was gonna say I know you love him. You took him against me in that one event, and
Yeah,
he did exactly what I expected him to do.
Dane, Dwalin, and Gloin. All 3 have +1 to wound. All 3 have 3 attacks. All 3 have 3 might, and they just wreck house.
Yeah.
Like just throw the 3 of them in. Even if you keep Dane back for the 6-inch banner, you just have those 2. They just mince through everything.
And that's from and you're talking there from the Erebor Reclaimed version.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, so you have a really good. I feel Iron Hills is great, and I love the Iron Hills troops, and the siege ballistas, those X factors like Joe was talking about, the chariot, which I have something to talk about with the chariot too, but we'll get to that. And it to me, if Iron Hills is the way you want to go, then Iron Hills is going to be you relying on Dane to do a lot of work and not get in a really sticky situation because he's going to be your leader for one, and for two, once he charges, he has to always charge because of his ferocious temper special rule. And you're going to have to rely on those X factors. But if you're trying to go with just a very strong horde of dwarves that can actually support each other, unlike Khazad-dûm, then Erebor Reclaimed is really the way to go, in my opinion, because you're going to open yourself up to a heck of a lot more synergy with your hero diversity, and that's actually where the armies kind of switch. You see a lot of times where you talk about army synergy between troops and heroes, and this time it's more the heroes giving the synergy to themselves.
One of the best combos I've seen. If you're not, I'm not a huge fan of siege equipment, so whenever I play at Iron Hills, I always try and keep it siege out of it. But one of the best combos I saw was probably around 650 points. Was Dane on his boar, a captain on a goat, and then having a nice mix of cavalry and foot troops to then foot troops hold the line, and then the captain with Dane and the goat riders just doing hammer and anvil kind of situation.
Yeah, and they're really good for that because we haven't talked anything really about the goat riders, but the goat riders, they lack the full mobility of a traditional, horse ridden cav model, but they make up for that with their potential knockdown ability when they charge in on a 5-up. I mean, and that's
knockdown, strength 4, +1 to wound.
Yeah,
just oof.
And they're armored cav.
Yep.
So
defense 6.
Yep. Are they defense 6 or the defense 5?
Defense 6 because they just don't have the shield. Shield makes them 7.
Oh, okay. You're talking about the rider. I was thinking of the cav.
Yeah.
My bad. The goat is
Yeah, the
defense.
Oh
goat-
no, the rider.
Yeah.
The goats are an armored horse.
Yeah,
Basically.
Yeah.
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 Armored horse, but with 8-inch movement instead of 10. Yeah, I think the only issue I have with the goat riders is they may be a touch too expensive for my liking. But when you compare the fact that the armored horse for a Knight of Dolan Roth would be the equivalent of the upgrade from a Iron Hills warrior with because they get the war spear in their profile.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a 9-point increase from a base warrior, which is the same as a Knight of Dolan Roth. You know, they get for a lance and armored horse, it's a 9-point upgrade. So I wish they weren't so expensive, but it makes sense.
I think too they have to pay that tax, that point tax for that strength 4. To get that war spear plus 1 wound, I mean you're needing like 4s to wound a defense 6 model. So I think
Right.
they kind of put in a little tax on them.
Well, no, I mean, like I
That
said,
and
it's the
the
same because it's 8 for an armored horse for Dolan Roth plus 1 is a lance, and then so if you take the base points of a dwarf Iron Hills warrior, and then compare it to a goat rider, it's 9-point difference, which would be 8 points.
and that
for...
free. You got that free 5-up roll on a man-sized target if you knock him down before combat even starts.
Yeah, I mean, so theoretically, if you compare it to a like model that's equally pointed, they get that special rule for free. You know.
I haven't actually bought any of the physical models for them. Is just because of their actual physical cost.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why I haven't got any for my Iron Hills collection.
Well, you can always borrow mine. So
yeah,
I have far too many.
I was like, I was like a while ago. I was about playing a pure Iron Hills army. I think it was like for 650 points, and I was like, ooh, I'll have to hold off on that because I have several projects I'm working on. So.
It sounds about right for everybody. I got this project and that project. So we've talked a lot about the upsides, and I think we've kind of hinted a little bit at it. But I want to talk about the downsides for a minute, and we've talked about them as well. But as we've talked about them, I really want to talk about how we mitigate it, and then take two different stances from it. So the first big weakness is we talked about the fact that they're only 5-inch movement, and even their cav models are only 8-inch movement. So we said the way you can mitigate that is with the crossbows. So I know, Joe, your approach is usually to take the more crossbows for range. Josh, your approach is more of a horde mentality where, okay, it might take me a few more turns to get to you, but I have a lot of heavy troops. If you pick off 1 or 2, I'm still going to hit you with a lot of heavy troops. Am I understanding that right? Like, that's how I've seen you play it.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, because you said it yourself. You take usually about like 4 crossbows, just enough to throw something, but not a whole lot. Because your whole mentality is, let me take my turns to get to you, but when I do, I'm gonna smash you because I have a strength 4, defense 8 horde.
Yeah, I usually run no more than 6 crossbows. When thinking of I'm in my thinking of Erebor Reclaimed with Old Dane example, I'll kit him out 666 with 6 swords and shield, 6 spear and shield, 6 crossbows, and then any other warband may have a couple goats, but the rest is just going to be sword and board just down the line.
That makes sense. Yeah. So
normally, like when I do the Iron Hills, I haven't done this. I used to do this. I recently started taking crossbows, but when I took them before, I normally just took the big twirly whirly for
right.
Let's say I'm versing elves or Haradrim or whoever, someone who has a lot of bow shots. Okay, you can have your a lot of bow shots. I'll shoot my big boy, and that way I'm forcing them to have to move towards me also. So they can't just sit back and shoot while I march my army up because then I could just start raining down big ballista shots on them. That's one of the mitigating factors for their lack of mobility.
However, that in itself, sorry, I'm going to interject. That in itself is also it's a it's a tactic to cover a weakness in mobility, but it can also expose you to another weakness in the fact that if you're relying solely on the twirly whirly to cover your advance, you've only got a 50-50 shot, maybe a little better. We'll call it like 58-60% shot of it actually working due to the fact that it's only a 4-up hit value. Yes, you get to reroll ones, but if you roll a 1 and then reroll it and it's still too low, you're not gonna get it because they don't that ability to kind of negate the bow shots of your enemy only works if it actually hits. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that was. You go
I've
ahead,
had
Joe.
I've had games where the twirly whirly will kill 30 points. So it almost never makes up its point value in actually hitting stuff, but the fact that I have it in my list is normally what makes people play, move, deploy, etc. how they wouldn't
true,
normally. The fact that
true.
that could happen.
This is true.
Yeah.
When I used to take it, I would even take just again maybe 3 or 4 crossbows just on the off chance that it didn't go off this turn, so I'd have something to then try and force my opponent a little bit. But yeah, the negating factor of that twirly whirly it is it's a double-edged sword. It can be a big boon, but it can also hinder you in some ways.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like Joe said, it's not going to make its points up, and I think that's something where, as much as I do
Especially
like
with
it,
the point increase.
yeah, I mean,
Especially.
when you're looking at it, it's essentially a whole warband's worth of dwarves, and you have to debate, okay, what is my build with this list? Is my build to try and use my X factors to threaten my opponent into coming to me and then hitting them from there? Or am I going to go ahead and use the strengths of this army, which is high defense, high strength, and just deploy straight on the line? Have the 6 or so bow shots, like Josh said, just to pick off and force some mobility from your opponent. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to like two things: a, your play style, because if you're not a big fan of siege, I'm in the middle. I like siege weapons. I see where they're really essential to some armies. Like my original thought was Iron Hills always has to have the Iron Hills ballista, but as I've played with it more, it's like, not really. You don't have to have it. Or is your play style more of the let me hoard this out? So
Yeah, I remember back when like a few years ago when we first met and I was running Iron Hills, we would have debates about it because you can take the ballista that has these negating factors, but if it doesn't perform well, you're 125 points down.
exactly.
Or do I want to take a captain and 4 extra guys?
Exactly. And a lot of times it can just be, the points that you spend in the blister, you might just be filling out a warband. Because the thing that I've seen is once you start taking that ballista, you're not filling your warbands out. And I'm a guy who doesn't fill my warbands out anyway. Like I put my heroes in and then build the troops around them. So none of my warbands are ever usually maxed out unless I'm playing with like a lot of minor heroes when I'm playing with ranges of Athelion. So if I drop the ballista, then instead of having Dane with say 6-foot troops and two goat riders, then I'm looking at him maybe having 12-foot troops and 4 goat riders, so he can maximize his full 18. And then if you get stuck in a situation where you're playing a scenario like Maelstrom, which 3 out of the 18 scenarios are Maelstrom, so you've got that what is that, a 18% chance, or it's a 1 in 6, so whatever that is.
But Iron Hills specifically actually has that +1 -1 too for Maelstrom.
Yeah, but he's getting to the point of the ballista has to be on the table before anyone even rolls.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the downside of siege equipment, is that it has to be on the table. If you're going second, it's out there alone, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep. And then you're having to spend might points, and where if you're not spending those points on the ballista, you can buff your war bands, and you have a chance where you can keep, your leader Dane alive better in those situations if he gets potentially surrounded by your opponent. Because
a buddy of mine up here in Fredericksburg, his name is John. He runs Iron Hills pretty much pure all the time. And at an event recently, it was 800 points. He got into a Maelstrom, went second, and his opponent had Azog's Legion and just surrounded the ballista. And then him coming on second, he surrounded the troops surrounding his ballista, and it was just an all-out brawl
Yeah.
right there. And the ballista didn't do a thing.
Yeah, and that is something that I have seen. I haven't even played scenarios like what's the divide and conquer, I think it is, where you deploy in alternate corners. Like you deploy your war bands in alternate corners. So I deploy in like corner 2 and 4, and you deploy in corners 1 and 3. Well, the siege ballista still comes on like a regular deployment. It doesn't go in the corner, I think. I can't remember, so don't quote me on that. But either way, it ended up where when I played that game, I got 2 shots off with the ballista, and by that point, my opponent had been able to march across the board and get to it and completely negated it. So it didn't make its points up at all.
Yeah, and you got to think in that same situation, it minimizes the effect of the twirly whirlies, because even if you're deploying in a corner, now, unless you're shooting at the opposite corner, it's not really covering much of the map to negate your opponent's shooting.
Right, because of the fact that you're kind of coming at that weird angle across the board. And the what is it? Storm the Camp is the same way for that as well.
Yeah.
What else? And then there's like Ill Met by Moonlight kind of negates the effectiveness of it as well. So there's a lot of scenarios out there. At least I'd say off the top of my head, I can name 6 where it can negate the effectiveness of the Twirly Whirly. So that being said, if you do like siege engines, by all means take them. But
it's one of the best siege engines in the game.
Oh yeah, I agree. It is the
just
best.
Not point wise.
Yeah. Well, effectiveness wise, yes. Point wise, yeah. But I mean, it makes sense though, because if you compare it to like a Minas Tirith catapult, Battle Cry Trebuchet, the Trebuchet hits harder, but its scatter is worse. It doesn't have the ability to reroll ones.
And it doesn't have the old twirly whirly.
Exactly.
Nope. Nothing's got the twirly whirlies.
And the free heroic shot.
Correct.
Oh yeah.
That too. And that's something we haven't talked about, but I mean,
totally forgot about it.
Yeah. So when you compare it, it's only 45 points difference, and it's like it kind of makes up for that in its special abilities and what it can do. So from a point wise, I think it's worth it. From a strategic tactical wise, like how are you going to use it? I think it depends on the player.
Yeah, I agree with that. It honestly depends on who's playing it, who wants to use it, and why they want to use it.
Yeah. So,
but then,
go ahead, Josh.
But touching on, we were talking about that being a negation for the mobility issue.
Yeah, for weaknesses.
But the only other way to negate your mobility, Dane has March, but you're really not wanting to use all of his might.
Nope.
And so the other option is a captain.
Correct.
And unless you put the captain on a goat and you take a whole bunch of goat riders, even though they're 8-inch movement, it helps, but it's not as good as others.
No. Well, and so I think the way you negate that again is unless you're playing against a jerk who plays with like 6 siege weapons like you experienced a few years ago, Josh.
Yeah, let's talk about that story.
No, we don't talk about him down here anymore. He's the guy who kind of made us all go, ugh. He's the reason that I started limiting siege weapons, because when you turn Lord of the Rings into Warhammer 40K, you don't belong. But
it's not fun for one of the parties.
No. I mean, it shouldn't be fun for either, but some people care about winning at all costs. But anyway, your tactic of just hoarding out a high defense, high strength army is another way to mitigate. In my opinion, it's another way to mitigate the weakness of mobility, because of the fact that now you might be moving slow, but you've just got this huge horde that's moving at you, and it's hard to stop.
Yeah, it's a giant wall of metal just slowly approaching you, and you may whittle it down 1 or 2 guys, but I will still have a good number when I reach you.
So this is like a similar. It's completely different, but kind of similar. Because I like one of my favorite armies to play is the Shire, and their big thing is an absolute lack of mobility also, but they don't
Yep.
have that extra cav option. And I can say I don't know if you ever had this problem with your dwarves, but there are some games where I'm like, I don't have enough turns left to get to that objective, or I don't have enough turns left to get off the other side of the board or to get to their supplies. You know, there are like factors like how you deploy them and stuff, but I don't know, maybe you guys could touch on that. I know like when I played my dwarves, I haven't really felt that lack of mobility, but I also have elves men with them normally too, so with cav horses.
Well, and so that's actually another way that you can mitigate um, your weakness in mobility is by allying in. So, you know, one of the things you could say is since Iron Hills is so elite, yeah, even if you hoard them out, you're still not going to be a true horde at like a 40s 50s number, but you can ally them with oh crap, I just lost the thought. Survivors of Lake Town, and
Yeah.
now you're talking about easily pushing 60 because those little wicker basket shielding fishermen are ridiculously cheap.
The only other way to the way I do it is I don't ally in really much at all. So having one or two cav just held off in reserve to maybe spring out and try and capture things late game, or really it's planning ahead. Like as I'm approaching you, seeing you maneuver, I'm like, okay, where do I need to be? Where am I going to be in 3 or 4 turns? If I can push through, maybe 2 turns later, if I'm in combat, okay, am I pushing through fast enough? Where do I need to go? Just thinking ahead on where the lack of mobility is. When do I need to start moving away to start taking things?
So your recommendation is to dip into the strategy part of Middle Earth strategy battle game, and I 100% agree with that because that is part of the game.
Yeah, it's how I adjust for it, because I'm not a huge fan of so back to Erebor Reclaimed example of having so many heroes to choose from. I don't really want to take a captain. I
Yeah,
want
I
to get
agree.
one of the named guys who get more abilities in.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a march. I may not have a mounted hero to run off and do something. So I have to sit here and go, okay, I've been in combat for 3 turns. I am pushing through, but am I going to push through in the next 2 turns before the game ends?
Yeah, I could definitely see that being a bit of an issue.
So basically, playing the strategy of knowing what the objective is, and then constantly analyzing and reanalyzing what is your army doing on a turn-to-turn basis. You know, this turn was really good push, but this last turn was not a really good push. But in the average, you're doing a good job. Or oh, I had a really shitty 3 turns in a row. I need to maybe reanalyze how I'm strategizing and playing this in order to achieve the objective.
Yeah, and say my opponent is like 3 or 4 guys away from breaking, and the game could end in the next 2 turns. I need to start peeling 1 or 2 dwarves off to start moving away, and then start shielding with everybody else to try and keep the game going. So these guys could get to the objective.
So one of the
in the next 2 or 3 turns.
One of the things I've heard is when building an army, you should always have a purpose for putting a model in. Like this model is in there for a specific reason. Now, I'm not one of those high-end crazy gamers that think, all right, I am taking this warrior Minas Tirith, and this warrior Minas Tirith is specifically taken so that every time I play him, the only thing he's going to do is sit on the edge and shield and shield and shield and shield and hold the edge. But so I'm not going that far. But from what it sounds like is if you are getting into combat with your army, you kind of have a few guys maybe already in mind of who you're going to start potentially pulling to achieve those objectives.
In a sense, I wouldn't say I definitely don't think that far ahead. It's more of I'll build warbands that they can function by themselves. So like if I have Old Dane, Dwalin, and Gloin, I'm going to break it up to where each of them have at least 8 guys, so they have their own little mini shield walls so they can hold wherever they need to be.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Instead of having to rely on another hero or another troop in another warband to do something.
Yeah.
Does-
I know. Sorry, real quick.
I was just gonna ask, does Old Dane have the fearless bubble? I don't think he does, right?
No, Old Dane does not get the fearless bubble. Sadly, he trades that for his banner effect.
Okay.
I think I like the
But
banner
like,
better.
yeah,
I
I'll
don't know, that's
throw
kinda
a
tough.
banner in. It really depends. It's a totally different play style. Whereas, like the very first game I remember I played down at Dry Falls when I was running the very first game getting back into this whole hobby. I had Iron Hills and I took Dane on the boar, and I was facing gosh, what's his name? The guy who's friends with Jerry
Young Duke.
up
Mike.
north.
Oh, Mike.
Mike, yes. Mike had Angmar, and that fearless bubble came in so much use because I'd never faced Angmar in the new edition.
Right. So you weren't really
And
sure what to expect.
yeah, and then he ended up breaking me at one point, and he goes, "You need to make a courage check." I'm like, nah, fearless bubble. I'm good. I'm just gonna sit right here.
Yep. As long as
So
Dane sticks around, you're good. Yeah.
it's a more aggressive. It aids to the more aggressive play style, whereas Dane, being the 6-inch banner, he's just gonna chill behind, and your warriors are gonna do the work.
So he is 3 attack though, isn't he?
Yes.
He is. And it's not bad to throw him in, but look, when I have him with Dane when I have him with Dwalin and Gloin, I let Dwalin and Gloin do the work.
Right.
And then I hold Dane back
Right. He's not
to then throw him where he's needed.
I got you. So that's one of the advantages. Instead of where with Iron Hills, Dane, Lord of the Iron Hills, has to be. He doesn't have to be, but he should be your focal point of what you use to go kill big stuff. With Airborne Reclaimed, he can do that, but that's not really what you want him to do. You want to use the support heroes that you, quote unquote, the support heroes that have the ability to do the same thing while you maximize the ability of that 6-inch banner.
Yeah, and one thing I'll do sometimes is same way of splitting up my army. If I don't want three flanks, I just want 2. I'll load up Dane. I'll load up Dwalin's warband with a banner, so Dwalin can go off and do his own thing. He has banner support that way, and then Gloin will stick with Dane and use Dane's banner effect, and they'll go and hold their flank.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So I want to talk about a model that we've kind of alluded to a few times, and I said we'd get to it. So I want to get to it. I don't think you've ever used it, Josh. Joe, you may have, but the Iron Hills Chariot. Let's discuss that.
It's a dream. Eventually, I'll pay for it, and when I'm like 25 years older, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I have one, so you can always borrow mine.
I may.
I don't mind lending models.
The Iron Hills Chariot's a very interesting model, in where it can do a lot in a game, or it cannot do a lot in a game.
Well, and it's also a model that can do nothing all game, and then the absolute last turn of the game can win it for you.
Yeah.
As you might remember, Joe.
So I've versed it. I've never actually used it. I versed it between you and Dan a lot.
Need to get Dan in here.
Dan, to be fair though, Dan did not play it with Iron Hills. He allied it in through Lake Town. He was playing Lake Town, and then he wanted to put the Chariot in to give it a little extra hitting power.
Right. And so I've played it
on it.
Right. I've played it from the Iron Hills perspective. I think if you're gonna spend the points on it, I absolutely think you should take it with the captain because of the fact that it's going to give you fight 5. That is one of the biggest things in the game right now is armies that have synergy to make themselves fight 5. So you're not going to get shut down by a common fight 4 soldier just standing in front of you and shielding and winning a roll off every turn.
Gives you a master battle too, doesn't it?
Master battle.
It does, but you can't use combats. You can use it for movements and marches because he can't. The guy is. He can strike too, because he gives his fight value, but he does not give his attacks. So because you can master a battle strike, right? Even if you don't have it.
Yeah, you
I-
should be able to master battle anything.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I think so.
Joe,
My understanding is how it works.
Joe, did you have a was that a statement, Joe, or was that a thought?
No, I was saying I think so.
Oh,
You can
okay.
mimic
I mean,
strike.
sorry, I thought you said I think though. My apologies, but yeah, I think you're both right. I'm pretty sure you can. Thinking about what it says in the book right now is like this: you can use the rule even in a situation where normally you couldn't call that special rule. So that's another reason to take the captain is if you get hit by somebody who's a fight 5 and they strike up, which I did that. I played against Iron Hills with Rohan. I had a Rohan, who was it? Durnhelm, charged the chariot and did a strike. Now, my opponent didn't think about it at the time and didn't call Master of Battle to strike, but he could have and potentially have outstruck me, which would have really screwed me over. But yeah, I really think the captain is definitely something you need to take. A for Master of Battle, B for March, C for movements, and then
the
D for the fight value.
biggest thing, I think the biggest thing too is you give the chariot a point of will to resist
Absolutely.
magic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's something where going to what I said earlier about Joe is like, so Joe and I played a game. I think we played that Divide and Conquer one, Joe. And he had Isengard, and Saruman was just shutting down my chariot all game. Shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. You immobilize the driver like all game. So all I could do was just get charged and shoot the crossbow. Now, that's not a bad thing to be stuck doing because the crossbow on it gives you a potential for 6 strength 4 shots. And then if you get into combat, you still have, you can have 4 or 5, depending on if you shoot the crossbow, attacks in the fight. But the last turn of the game, or the last 2 turns, after you ran out of magic and failed to immobilize the driver, I was able to go and run over Saruman, The impact hits took him off his horse and wounded him the first turn. The second turn killed him. And that won me the game because of the fact that I killed the enemy leader. So having that point of will to resist spells can be really, really useful. So I think the Iron Hills Chariot is really great. Again, it goes with the how does it fit your playstyle. If your playstyle is not to play, because it's more like playing chess, but instead of playing chess with a whole bunch of different pieces, you're just playing with one large piece, and that large piece has to perform. So if you can't keep your cool in the heat of battle when that one piece isn't performing, playing the chariot's probably not for you. Of course, conversely, if it's doing really well, not getting too bloodthirsty and staying on target for the objective. Because I've had it where the thing has run over an entire warband in one turn because of the impact hits. And then I've had where it's done absolutely nothing but tie up 60 fishermen for an entire game, which that's not a bad thing either.
I've never played it. I have seen it played. I've never played it or played with it. But I've seen it played either 2 ways. Either really aggressive to try and get as many impact hits as possible to just plow through chaff, or to essentially be a little mini artillery piece with that multi-shot bolt thrower on the front.
Yeah, and I think it can do well. I think I kind of go from both perspectives. I want to be able to get the impact hits, but at the same time, I have a D6, Gatling gun running around. The ability to get 6 strength 4 shots off. Of course, I don't think I've ever really gotten 6 shots off. I think my average is 2 or 3. But still, the threat of it is there. But you got to be careful with its movement because of the fact that it is a chariot, so it moves like a chariot. You can get it bogged down really easily. And I think I had a game against, it was either against you or Dan, you, Joe, or Dan, where I got bogged down and I had to spend the turn turning it around. So my big 200 plus point thing did nothing for a turn, and you can't have that. You cannot have that if it's making up a large chunk of your army. You have to have it doing something every turn, even if it's just shooting shots that all miss. It's still a threat at that point, as opposed to just okay, I got to turn around because I backed myself. You didn't back. I walked myself into a corner like an idiot.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely could be a detriment if you make the wrong. I don't know. If you make the wrong turn trying to get kills with it, like you see like 6 guys grouped up, and you're like, oh, next turn I'm gonna get these 6 guys. I'll get priority, and then they move, and you're having to go in a straight line now, or whatever.
Yeah.
I can definitely see going down the wrong alley kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, you got to really, it's one of those things where you have to analyze, like we were saying earlier, analyze what's happening on the fly. Just because there's a position where, yeah, I can go and run 6 guys over. But if it's early game, is it really worth it to go run those 6 guys over and then put your chariot in a really bad position for the next 2 or 3 turns, which is about half of the length of a game? Or is it more conducive to just kind of sit there and let them come at you for a turn or 2 and then really make your move? I mean, late game, if those 6 guys could be the difference between breaking and not breaking, maybe it's worth going for.
Here's an interesting anecdote I have actually about the chariot. So I versed it plenty of times against you and Dan, right? The first time I ever versed it, I was at Nova Open, and I was playing the Shire. This is that year I took the Shire to Nova, and he saw an opportunity to run over 10 hobbits, which I didn't really care. Like, go ahead, you're gonna kill
40 points.
30. Yeah. So he literally put his chariot in a corner to kill those guys, and it was facing the corner. So the rest of the game, I'd win priority. I'd throw a hobbit in. You kill the hobbit, so what? And then it was like that in pretty much the entire game. So it was just a maneuvering thing where he literally put his chariot in the corner to get pretty much a meaningless amount of kills.
Yeah.
Which I do feel like that would also be probably like an inexperienced player, like someone who doesn't really understand, like especially like getting the points of the game down, like objectives down. Maybe taking the chariot later on, but I probably wouldn't recommend it to a newer Iron Hills player.
Yeah, I highly agree.
Josh? But I do think it's a good piece. I think it's a good piece, and it's a good wild card. It's a pretty good X factor to put in your list.
Right.
Not to mention a gorgeous model.
Yes.
I will say it is an absolute nightmare trying to put together.
Just putting regular goat riders together, I can't imagine putting those things together.
I have some goat riders, and I'm sitting here looking at them right here on my table, and I've just kind of been picking my models up as we've been chit-chatting, looking at them, and the goat riders weren't all that hard, but the goats on the chariot are smaller because of the fact that scale is an annoying thing, and they've got to fit, and they are just the horns. Oh my gosh. I'm talking strictly to the hobbyists in the hobby that do this thing not to play but to enjoy the awesome models. They were the biggest pain in the ass I have ever had. I don't think I've ever had a model that was a bigger pain in the ass to put together. I really don't think I have. The horns are tiny, so you've got to go at them with tweezers. And then you got to hold them in the right position. Otherwise, they'll start drooping. Yeah, it was a nightmare.
I don't know. I do have a horror story about a metal Treebeard, but that's for a different day. So we've kind of talked about Iron Hills, Airborne Reclaimed, strengths, weaknesses, pros, cons. One thing I kind of wanted to address is I've never played Airborne Reclaim. It's an army I've been kind of thinking about, but kind of to Josh's point, I've actually recently built an army of Thror. I bought it. I haven't built it yet. I kind of see them playing very similar after kind of listening to how he plays them. What would be the strength of Airborne Reclaimed? Like, if you're going to compare Airborne Reclaimed and Army of Thror, why would you take our Army of Thror? Why would you take Airborne Reclaimed over Army of Thror?
So, I'm just going to say this right now. Every time I go and build an Army of Thror list, the moment I'm done, I'm like, why am I not playing Erebor Reclaimed?
I was thinking
So
that too
the-
while Joe was talking. It's like everything
The real
Army of Thor
question,
does, Erebor Reclaimed and Iron Hills does better.
the
Well,
real
Erebor Reclaimed
question is, why
specifically.
do you take? Well, the real question is, why do you take Army of Thror when you can take Erebor Reclaimed? So the
Because you like
main
Thor.
difference is, and that's completely fair. The advantages Erebor Reclaimed has over it is you have the defense 8 standard troops, and you get crossbows. You have a cavalry option, and everyone is strength 4. Whereas in Army of Thror, unless you only take the Guardians of the King upgrade, you're gonna have a scattering of strength 3.
Yeah, and if you take no Guardians of the King, then they're all strength 3. So
Yeah.
I mean, and you can almost argue that you have better hero diversity. So troop diversity wise, it's the same. You have 2 profiles, Warriors of Erebor and Grimhammers. You have 2 profiles in Iron Hills / Erebor Reclaimed. You have Goat Riders and Iron Hills Warriors. I would give the point to Erebor Reclaimed because the Goat Riders give you mobility that the Army of Thor does not have. And then another point
Mhm.
is they can take crossbows, so they have ranged, which Army of Thor does not have.
Unless
At,
you ally Army of Thror with Dale, yeah, there's no option to
yeah, oh
get
well, I mean,
anything over 6 inches.
yeah, if you're talking purely dwarf from a dwarf perspective, uh, then yeah, they have the advantage for range. Uh, and then heroes, as good as Thror, Thrain, young Thorin, young Dwalin are, I just feel like that's 4 models. You got young Balin too, and then Grimhammer Captain and Captain of Erebor. So that's all your heroes for Army of Thror. You have
I'll
13
say,
dwarves just for Erebor Reclaim, and then if you go with Old Dane, you still have a much better choice with Dane, King of the Mountain, Thorin, uh, Dwalin, Glowin, you know.
yeah, you have way more options with Erebor Reclaimed. But even looking at just the big 3, like you have Thror, Thrain, and young Thorin, and comparing them directly to my big 3, which is Old Dane, Dwalin, and Gloin. Thror and Old Dane both are a 6-inch banner. Thror has a little bit more defense. Dane has a harder hit with the +1 to wound.
Yep.
Thrain and Dwalin both do +1 to wound. Both are 3 attacks. You can, sorry, back to Old Dane and Thror. Thror's a little bit cheaper than Old Dane. Old Dane is 130, whereas Thror is 120. Then you get to Thrain. He's 120, where Dwalin is 115.
Mm-hmm. So you make up
And
the difference.
then, yeah, a little bit difference there. And then young Thorin, if you kit him out, he's 105, whereas Gloin is 90 points, 3 attacks, +1 to wound, strength 4, defense 8, 3 might. It's very equal for the heroes on the big 3 scale, at least.
Yeah, I think I might give the edge to Army of Thror only from the point where Thrain and young Thorin, I think both have 3 fate, so you have a chance to
Yeah.
keep your 2 hitters. Because when I built an Army of Thror, I took it with those 3. The 3 you just said are the 3 I took, and basically because Thorin, the Oaken Shield, he's going to be able to go into combat and shield and hold where he needs to, and still be able to make a hit. Thrain, I think is Thrain strength 5, or am I going crazy?
Strength 4.
Strength 4.
But he gets +1 to wound, right?
Yeah, he has a master forged.
2-handed, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Thror is kind of like Old Dane, in my opinion. He's there, he can do some stuff, but you don't really want to put him out there in a position where he can get hurt, and he doesn't have a
You're
+1 to wound.
prioritizing that 6-inch banner.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. So maybe give the edge a little bit to Army of
Like you
Thor,
said,
and that's just my opinion. But
yeah,
I think,
like you said, the crossbows and the goats, as a army utility wise, make Arable Reclaim so much better.
Right. I
The
agree, and that's why I would go with him.
tools that the heroes can bring in. I didn't even mention that the Thror gets that one free reroll for priority.
Yep.
If you take young Balin, he can use his will to reroll priority. So you have more shenanigans, I guess you could say, with Army of Thror hero wise, but Army core wise, I just don't see the point of why not taking Erebor
Yeah.
over
Your
these older dwarves.
Your shenanigans are great. I love that word. That's a great way to explain it. I think the shenanigans are great. However, if your army around you can't support that or can't hold up, they don't have the push, in my opinion. They don't have the defense 8. They don't have the strength 4.
Mm.
They just don't have the ability to push like Iron Hills does. So
now that being said, I have taken second with Richie in a doubles event where we took Army of Thror pure and we took second place. So I don't know why it doesn't like on paper it doesn't really add up, but I've done better with Army of Thror than I have with Erebor Reclaimed.
So what you're saying is you need to stop playing Erebor Reclaimed and focus on Army of Thor for a while.
I need to finally paint my Army of Thror so I can just keep using that as my army. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
So does that answer questions for you, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of for the audience. I would, like me personally, I tend to be more of a guy who likes to play test a lot of stuff, like
Yeah.
to actually see how I like using it. And I've never play tested Army of Thror or Erebor Reclaimed, so I couldn't, I wouldn't. I could see like the argument on paper people talk about either, because both of them like are similar. Well, the
Right.
new Erebor Reclaimed, I mean. But I figure like the Cav that Erebor Reclaimed would have, I think probably all around a better hero roster, because you can take the Army of Thor is limited to like what the 4 heroes. I mean, you can take Balin.
You get
5
five named heroes and 2 captain options.
And then Erebor Reclaimed has a pretty significant roster, right?
Far too many.
Yeah.
Depending
you
on
can
which way you go,
in like in the bigger points games, like 800, 1,000, I could see Erebor Reclaim probably giving you a better return in terms
Yeah.
of heroes, their abilities and stuff.
Yeah, and
Now,
I
I
could
do
see
find-
maybe like. Go ahead, Josh.
Go ahead. Okay. I know we haven't really. This was between Iron Hills and Erebor Reclaim, but just to touch on when I play Army of Thror, I always run it as the Thror with 18 of the Guardians of the King to give me that strength 4.
Right.
Thrain with as many spears as I can give him to support the Guardians of the King.
Right.
And then young Thorin, because of his ability to give dwarves with once per game, give dwarves within 3 inches of him an extra strength. Throw him in there to get strength 4 and strength 5 dwarves for 1 turn.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there? I remember Was there something that they did to give like a +1 to fight value, or was it just the strength?
I think it's just strength.
Just the strength.
Okay.
Yeah, to Arn's the name of the rule.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's a very frontline focused army. And the only way to really branch it out is to ally in Dale with Girion. That's the only way to really change its playstyle. If not, it's just I'm gonna run at your face and hope I get there before anything bad happens.
And I will say this, having played Army of Thor a little bit, when I did, I allied in Iron Hills. And the reason I allied in Iron Hills was so I could have a mounted hero in Dane, so I could have some mobility, so I could add a couple goat riders to go with that mobility of the hero, and then to get ranged ability with either the ballista or crossbows, while still keeping a dwarven force, because I was playing.
Yeah, I keep forgetting
I
that.
wanted to play as a dwarf.
I always allied him with because I love Girion, so I would always ally him with Dale. But yeah, I keep forgetting that the Iron Hills combo to just get crossbows in there is also a good option.
I did build it from a perspective of allying in Dale as well. Because are they green allies?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
Girion's the green ally.
Yeah, so I actually didn't even bother to put Girion in. I just took the captains, which are cheaper, so I could maximize their war bands and get more of those strength 3 elf bows. I know it's not a lot of points you save by not taking Girion, but I think it's the difference in like 2 or 3 models, which gets you another elf bow.
Yeah.
But yes, if you're looking for, I don't see Army of Thror pure being good outside of anything over say 600 points.
Yeah, I can see that. Because there you're getting a good warband size for both Thror and Thrain.
Right. So, all right, Joe. I have one thing I'm thinking. Joe, you talked about Thranduil's Halls being one of the big. What you always ally with Iron Hills. Why?
hmm
Tell us a little bit about that. That's something we haven't spoken on.
So I am a big Thranduil's Halls guy. Like that's my favorite elf faction. That's the one I played the most. Um, and there was like a period of time, like 2016 through 17, where that was pretty much the only army I was playing.
Yep, I
But
remember playing you against it.
yeah, I felt like that it was missing some stuff. So of course, Thranduil's a beast. Legolas is good. I wouldn't say he's a beast. He's good at best. And then Tariel's was hit or miss for me. And I like having mounted heroes. So when the new supplement came out, well, it's not new anymore, but Armies of the Hobbit came out, and they had the ally matrix in there. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool. I can green ally with these armies and keep my army bonuses and all that. So I actually didn't do this until after we went to a tournament in Philadelphia, and I saw someone playing Thranduil's Halls with Iron Hills, and he had the ballista. He had Dane Thranduil. But he also had Lake Town. This is before they changed it to where you have to have a Hero of Valor to take a siege weapon. So we went to Philly, and I was like, I actually want to bring something really good to this event, something that's kind of, I don't know, try hard. So I came up with a list of taking Thranduil, fully kitted, taking Dane, taking the Iron Hills Ballista, and then taking Legolas to give me my bow shots. The idea was if I wanted to shoot a model with the Ballista and they can scatter it on some guy that's just kind of out there, I can use Legolas as insta shot to hopefully maybe kill the guy a turn or so before I know that like the heroic shots. Anyway, I came up with the idea for pretty much a try hard army, and it's a very big hit or miss because I tend to have a very low amount of troops in the list, like 30 at 800 points, which is very small because I'm paying a lot of points for Dane, Thranduil, and the Ballista.
Yeah. Well, and we've even had it where you've stopped taking the ballista as of late.
I have stopped taking. I play tested the list for 1,000 points. And I didn't take the Ballista. I took 6 crossbow dwarves. So basically, there's in the back of the armies of the Hobbit. I think there's actually lists that like Jay Clare and stuff have made, and he actually made a list with Dane 666, Thranduil 666, and then Bard 666, 6 bowmen, 6 spearmen, 6 swordmen, etc. So I kind of mimicked that and how I built Thranduil's warband and how I built Dane's warband, and I don't have Lake Town stuff, so I put Legolas in to kind of act as Bard. And it plays pretty good. I got a pretty good amount of troops for 1,000 points. It was like 52 models, which I was happy with, but it just didn't really. I feel like it didn't match the way I like to play. I either play two ways. I like a lot of high mobility stuff like Rohan, or I like playing the stupid horde like the Hobbits. So,
That's true.
so so it didn't really
Well, and I think the final nail in the coffin is you were kind of struggling with it for a while. I mean, I think it would probably do good for me if I were to play it because I can play both high mobility armies in Cav, but then I'm also used to playing the sword and shield armies. But we played the game. I think the last test game you had with it, or second to last, and the I had a captain in Minas Tirith, and him and some troops just went and ganked Thranduil, and it's just like, well, what can I do? Thranduil
I mean,
shouldn't lose to
when I'm rolling a 3 high on 3 dice.
yeah.
I mean, so but that also kind of goes into I don't like taking big heroes, and I have a list with
Two
two big heroes in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but I feel like if you played if you wanted to play Iron Hills, I think taking them Lake Town would probably be a better option, or playing them pure. And it sounds like Erebor Reclaimed has more than enough really good heroes you can take.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like at least if you fully kit out Thranduil, I don't know how good it really is, because you got close to 400.
Points, yeah.
Well,
He's
you
tied
got
up.
close to 400 points in 2 heroes. Yeah.
Well, doing it kind of helps from a hero's perspective. You get another from strictly Iron Hills, not Erebor Reclaim. You get to add another good hero outside of no name captains. Um, you can add mobility that's actually 10 inches with Mirkwood Cav. You can add, and then you can add Fight 5, which is nothing to scoff at because of the fact that they can
Yeah,
spear support.
that was kind of the idea of the list. Is I'd have my defense 7 front line, defense 8 with the shield wall, and then I'd have my fight 5 guys supporting them.
Yeah, and
But
then you can take bows as well that they might not hit as hard at strength 3, but they hit a little more frequently at they hit
Ruthless
more
shot.
at 3 up. Yeah, shoot value.
Yeah, the idea though, like that's the thing about a list like that, where you're kind of building a shield wall to work in one way. But then we were kind of talking about this earlier with like the ballista, but then when you start talking about scenarios where you have to spread out your army, or you deploy spread apart, it kind of kills the whole synergy.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing is like you tried to get that synergy with like Thranduil and getting his army bonus with them because it's not bad. The two army bonuses combined are pretty good. You're getting Master of Battle, out of 4+. There's another army bonus too. That's the Maelstrom one?
It's the Maelstrom one.
Yeah, so you get the Maelstrom army bonus, and then you get the what do you call it? The I just drew the blank. I just said
Master
it too.
Battle.
Yeah, thank you.
Master.
Wow, that's pretty bad. God, I must be getting old. And then you can get Thranduil's bonus, which is isn't it like +1 to
+1 wound.
Yeah, so not bad at all. So
yeah, I kind of feel like though.
But then you're losing a lot of that. You're losing the defense 8. You're losing.
Yeah.
The back row elves are only defense 5, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're losing a lot of good stuff, I think, in doing that. Like. Honestly, the horde of Iron Hills dwarves is something that does intrigue me. I feel like it could be pretty good.
I would hate to fight it, just from a standpoint that a lot of armies I play outside of Isengard, because I do play Isengard pretty frequently as of late for the last year or so, are strength 3. So I would have a really hard time breaking that, even if I can.
Well, even Isengard would have a pretty hard time of breaking that.
Well, and that's what I said. Is like I played
Yeah.
against Josh, and he can attest to it. Like my scouts at strength 4, I was wounding him on 6s, even in defense 8, but he's always wounding me on 5s. So my numbers did nothing, or I had a few more models, but I couldn't do anything to harm him.
Yeah, when we faced off, and the main drawback for you was having Malher go all the way around, trying to flank and just taking too long to get around. I was able to hold the line long enough to where I was just able to
my numbers,
whittle you down before the reinforcements got there, and by the time they came around the corner, I was like, all right, turn around, let's go face them.
Well, and that goes into a weakness of the Uruk-hai Scouts list, which we won't talk about in this video, but yeah, it does. It's exactly right. You had the numbers in order to basically play to your advantage and mitigate the advantage of my army at that time.
So I'd actually like to kind of delve into this topic real fast. Is what are armies that counter or both Iron Hills and Airborne Reclaim, I kind of get they play a little bit different. But what are armies that they don't like versing? So, like for instance, like Iron Hills list, you probably wouldn't want to verse Mordor with the Witch King because the Witch King can shut Dane down. But
Yeah, I would agree with that.
well,
Casting heavy list.
Yeah, casting heavy list. I feel like when we've played before, Iron Hills Warriors don't really like versing mounted units. Like
Yeah, I
your
was thinking all
heroes,
mounted Rohan might be one.
Rohan.
Yeah, they might have a hard time killing the Iron Hills troops, but if they can, what do you call it? I just drew a blank again. Dang! But if they can hit and
Envelop?
fade, yeah, if they can hit and fade, like come in, hit a flank, kill a few guys, back off on the next turn while the dwarves are trying to reposition to get to them, or have a second wave come in as the dwarves reposition and envelop. I feel like all mounted Rohan would really hurt that.
I found that magic is the big one.
Yeah.
Only having will on the heroes, not having resistance to magic anywhere else, it really hurts. And kiting units that are just going to sit there, run away from you, and shoot you the whole time, eventually they will whittle you down.
Yeah.
The example being the 9 riders at your 1,000-point event a long time ago, when I'm just trying to run after them and they're just black darting me nonstop, and I'm just like,
you had to play
okay.
that. Yeah. I would probably say army that has multiple siege weapons in it as well, as we know.
Why you gotta keep bringing it up? Get the PTSD twitch over here. Just
It's a learning experience for our viewers.
How about a horde? How would Airborne Reclaimed or Iron Hills do against a Goblin Town or a Shire or?
If you have a choke point, it'll hold well. If you're in a place where they can come and get around behind you, it's not. It'll eventually crumble just due to weight of dice.
I think I agree, and I also think one thing I might want to add to that though is it might depend on the scenario, because if it's an objective scenario like capturing control, you're probably in trouble. But if it's Lords of Battle, let them envelop you, because you can just shield in every position where you might be outnumbered. But then when you get to your heroes, go ahead and have your heroes fight, because if your heroes can sit there and fight and kill 2 or 3 goblins a turn, or hobbits a turn, but the hobbits and goblins are sitting there needing 6s by 5s to wound you every damn turn, or 6s by 4s, then they're not going to do anything. You might get 7 or 8 kills in a turn with your heroes, especially if you do a couple like heroic combats, and they might turn around and get 1 or 2. So,
it really depends on the army build too.
Yeah, but I could see,
because like, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, but I could see exactly like you said, is due to the fact that they have that lack of mobility. If you get surrounded and you're stretched too thin, you might not be able to get repositioned quick enough to help a flank that's crumbling.
How about monsters?
It depends.
Depends on the monster.
If you get the hero on them, it really isn't a big deal. All your heroes are fight 6.
Yeah.
So they're gonna hold their own.
And they can strike.
And just shield wall based. It does come down to the dice, but there was an event, I think it was also down there at one of your events, Jason, where I was facing Azog's Legion with Erebor Reclaimed, and their troll was going up against 4 dwarves, and I pushed that guy back every single time. He would roll a 5, I would roll a 6.
Yep.
I wouldn't wound him, but that troll was just backing up. It wasn't going anywhere.
Well, I think, and that's kind of also been the current meta, is to stay away from big monsters like that have no ability to either A, get a reroll from a banner, or B, use a point of might to make it a 6. I could see a monster hero being an issue, like just for example, a Gwahir, which can
Birders.
Yeah, well,
Gullivar.
Yeah.
Gullivar. Yeah.
Birder's pretty rough.
Yeah.
I'm thinking more of like a strong. How about Bear? Your strength 8.
Oh, well, Don't even bring up bears.
but think
Bears are
about
gonna run through this army no matter what.
it sits on the edge and hurls. You know, that's you
Yeah.
got strength. I'm just looking at like strength 7, strength 8, monster heroes that can hurl and knock your shield wall down, and that's where you're gonna be. That's where the pain is. It's kind of the same weakness as the Cav, where but maybe a little more scary just because of the fact that Cav might knock you down. They might not. It all depends on if they win. Where if a monster wins, he could potentially throw one dwarf through 10 inches worth of dwarves and knock them all down.
Yeah. The defense 7 will hopefully get you through that, but once you lose shield wall, it's when you start sweating a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. So it's like monsters, hordes, depending on the scenario, magic, yeah, cavalry. So let's talk about strengths. What are they strong against?
I definitely see them
anything
being
that's
strong.
defense. Yeah, anything that's like defense 6 or lower, you're still gonna wound on 5s. So
Umbar,
their strength is one of their good ones.
Corsairs, Harad, specifically Serpent Horde, Minas Tirith, Rohan. Well, as long as they're not getting run over.
I definitely see them cracking most shield walls in the game. Like even like a Blackguard, a Barad-dûr, which are pretty hardy. Like I can see them even okay. Well, I have shield walls, so I don't care about your strength 5.
And we haven't even touched on their courage. The fact that all of them are courage 4.
Yeah.
So they're ignoring more terror than most.
Yeah, because most armies are all pretty much every man army's courage 3.
Can you take a? I've never even looked. Can you even take a Warhorn for the? Can
you can take a Warhorn, which what to do, but
I normally just have Dane on my list, and he has a 12-inch fearless bubble.
Yeah,
so I never even worry about it.
The fearless bubble is usually the way to go, I think.
Yeah, which is we haven't really. I touched a lot on the old Dane Erebor Reclaimed, but I haven't really touched on the regular Erebor Reclaimed. The fact that you can get Dane either allied in or a part of the list, it's in his profile that he gets that fearless bubble, so it does help a lot. Allying him in, keeping him as a hero of legend, and getting that extra bonus on top of that.
So I just looked at Iron Hills and Erebor Reclaimed, and you can't take a Warhorn.
You cannot.
You cannot. You can take a War Spear, but not a War Horn. The only available upgrades are for the troops are Shield, War Spear, Matta, Crossbow, Spear, and Banner.
Oh, well, I have a useless model then.
But
I 3D printed one. If you remember in the movie, when Bomber trumpets with that
horn?
big horn wrapped around him.
Yeah,
I found a 3D print that had one of those, so I got one of those and I put it on an Iron Hills model, and
so
like I have a Warhorn now.
That being said, going back to an army that Joe talked about, Army of Thror can take a Warhorn. So if you do an ally with Army of Thror in Iron Hills, maybe you take, let's see, both Grimhammers and Warriors of Erebor can take a Warhorn. So maybe you go ahead and get yourself some Courage 5 dwarves. Then the elves.
I've never been able to.
You can have the elves have yet another reason to hate them.
I've never had a justifiable reason to pay 30 points for a Warhorn, though. It's that 30 points, especially when you're looking at an already elite army.
Right. I agree.
That's 3 dwarves that you're not getting now.
There's only one faction in all the years I've been doing this war game where I actually buy a Warhorn for, and that's the Shire, and that's just because I can have 80 models that are Courage 4, and that's the only reason why I do it.
Yeah,
not a bad reason at all.
Yeah, but again, they're a horde army, so. But yeah, I can definitely see that. I don't really think you need to get a Warhorn for the Iron Hills. I've never when I played Iron Hills, Even like if Dane's not in that bubble, I've never really had a problem with them fleeing or anything. They're courage 4 is a very good courage value to
Yeah,
have.
you got a 50% chance of passing. So, all right. Does anybody have anything else? I think we've done Iron Hills.
The only
Go ahead.
thing I was gonna add was the if you Arable reclaimed outside of Old Dane, if you're taking Thorin, you're really just gonna want Cav. I mean, Thorin mounted on a goat and Dwalin mounted on a goat with 4 or 6 goat riders to back them up. It is disgustingly powerful.
Yeah, I can see that
I went
too.
up against Moria at I think it was like 650, and I just threw one guy into the Balrog to hold the Balrog back, and then I just goat stomped all the goblins behind the Balrog.
Okay, so
And
let me make sure I do this right. Dwalin has 3 attack base. Can
Yes.
use 2 axes to go to 4 attack. And
when he's on foot.
okay, that's it. All right, I was gonna say I can't remember. I
Yeah.
couldn't remember if I remembered he could go to 4 attack, but I couldn't remember if he could go to 4 attack mounted. But
No.
how disgusting would that be to have Dwalin on a goat being able to get 5 attacks?
Absolutely disgusting, because I have killed a dwarf king in one round of combat with Dwalin when I charged him. I charged him in. I struck up just to make sure I won the fight. Knocked him down. It was 8 attacks at +1 to wound, strength 5. Just destroyed him. I didn't even piercing struck. I could have piercing struck and just made it even worse, but I just ran in, just gone.
Well, dwarf kings are what? Defense 7?
Defense 8, I believe.
Okay, so it would have made you strength 6, which would have been 5s +1. You would have needed, yeah.
It would have been 5s down to 4s.
It would have been
because of
4s
the
on 8
+1.
dice. Yeah. Well, so if it was me playing, I would have to do that, and I would get 2 4s and 1 3, and have to might the 3 to a 4 to make sure I got the kill. Right, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've been having a lot of fun with Thorin and Dwalin on a goat, and then having 4 or 6 goat riders to run around with them, giving one of them a banner just in case, and then just running amok, and having maybe 8 to 10 regular dwarves with some crossbows to just hold the line while my goats run and do the heavy hitting.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a pretty common tactic when it comes to building. So that's probably at like what, 750, 800 points?
Around there, around 700.
Okay, yeah.
This last time.
700, 800. Yeah, that makes sense because those 3 heroes mounted plus having to have goats is going to take a huge chunk of points. But I mean, you're essentially doing what any typical 700-800 point army can do, where you take a strike group, a mounted hero, be they cheap or your leader, then give them some other mounted models around him. Like my favorite one was Imrahil with 4 or 5 Knights of Dol Amroth, where I can just kind of keep in my army, strike out, hit a bunch of guys, hit a flank, heroic combat, and pull Imrahil back, and then have a bunch of kills on a flank. Maybe I end up sacrificing my cav units, but if I can run in there, kill 10 or 12 guys in one turn, that's not a bad sacrifice for some guys, especially if it ends up being against an army that is, like a 40-point army or 40 model count army. If you can roll in and kill 10 guys in one turn, yeah, that's nothing to laugh at.
And not to mention Thorin as king on a goat gets free heroic combats.
Yeah,
so he can just ricochet around.
Yeah,
that's just the 2 main different play styles between the same army, but 2 totally different play styles. Whereas Old Dane, you're gonna horde out on foot, and with Thorin as king, you're wanting more cav.
Yeah, so I like it. Joe, you got anything last thoughts you're thinking about?
I think we pretty well covered everything I wanted to bring up.
I think between the 3 of us and our different ways of playing and all the ways that we've played them or played against them, So, all right, here we go. Last thing. What is your absolute favorite model from either Erebor Reclaimed or Iron Hills? Josh, we'll start with you as the veteran Iron Hills player / Airborne
Dwalin.
Reclaim player.
Dwalin.
Joe? He's got to think about this one.
Well, it's a toss between two models. Dane Ironfoot, Lord of the Iron Hills, probably.
Nice.
Oh yeah, that's a go-to there.
Yeah.
For Iron Hills, I'd say even though Dane is really good, I really do like Mern and Drar, and I want them to work one day.
Yeah, I would say if it weren't for this one thing, Mirren and Drar would definitely be, just because I like them from. I know they're a GW creation, but from a like a standpoint of coolness, they kind of remind me of the petty dwarves from the Children of Huron, and how they got betrayed by Mim. They were just wandering dwarves, and that's kind of what I think of when I think of Mirren and Drar. But for me, if it comes down to it, I'm going with the Chariot all day, every day.
That's fair.
Because one of my first experiences with it was playing against Joe's Iron Hills, Thranduil's Hall's army alliance, and I heroic marched over an entire warband of enemy Iron Hills warriors. All 10 of them died to one chariot in one movement.
I do have an honorable mention for Erebor Reclaimed, and that is Nori, Champion of Erebor, Lord of the East.
Nice.
Because he gets that special, the same thing the elves get for Lord of the West. He gets in his 80-point model.
Lord of the East.
That's pretty good. I didn't realize he had that.
Yeah, 80-point model gets a free reroll in the dual roll and a free reroll when making strikes. He's the Lord of the East.
That's badass. I'm surprised he's not the Lord of the Thief, because Nori was originally supposed to be the original burglar for the expedition until they hired Bilbo. But all right, so I think we've talked about everything. We've talked about strengths, we've talked about weaknesses, we've talked about the different tactics and ways to play the armies. We've talked about who to ally with, who not to ally with. We talked about what armies they're good against, what armies they're bad against, and we've talked about our favorite heroes, or our favorite models in general. So I'll leave it to you guys to say any parting words, and we'll sign off.
There are plenty of dwarf options out there, so may the best dwarf win.
If you play Iron Hills, just don't run over your opponent's 10 Iron Hills dwarves with the chariot.
Did I spark a little PTSD there, Joe?
Maybe a little.
I would say if you're a new player and you want to try and play dwarves, I recommend Iron Hills or Erebor Reclaimed. They are probably the best bang for your buck. I know they're expensive models, but you're going to not feel like you're trying to learn the game while constantly picking up dead models off the board. Unless you roll really, really badly, like me.
Yeah, the Defense 8 is very forgiving.
Yes, they're very forgiving.
If you make a mistake, you're able to quickly readjust.
Yep. But thank you, Josh. Thank you, Joe, for being guests on this inaugural Tactics and Talk episode. I look forward to doing more in the future. If you are watching this channel and watching this video, you made it to the end. I hope you hit the like, share, and subscribe button, because only 38% of my viewers are subscribed to the channel. Not very good, but hey, hopefully you can change that for me by hitting that subscribe button. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe, as I just said, and take care and enjoy your Middle-earth strategy battle game hobby.